Hey, y'all, and welcome back to Night Shift with Andrea Up Late. I am joined, as almost always, by my co-host BC Sanders. BC, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful,
Yeah,
as always.
as always. Welcome, guys. This is a true crime podcast that airs as a live YouTube show on the Andrea Up Late YouTube channel every Tuesday night at 8, 7 Central. We got some friends in the chats, if I can get back to them here. If you are a new listener, listener beware, depending on the show, I guess, as to how much we're bewaring. But you will hear us engage with our buddies in the chats. You're welcome to hop on. It's free. Just log in and you can join the conversation. Tonight, we are revisiting a case that I did back in season 1 called the Springfield 3. This case is still unsolved. As you know, I generally cover unsolved cases. We know that with advances in technology and DNA systems and things like this, and even just people's memories being jogged, it's always important to get these cases out there. And this one is mind-boggling. Do you know much about this case, BC?
I do a little bit, only because you mentioned it, and I read just enough to kind of understand that I don't know a whole lot about it.
Yeah. Well, because there's a whole lot we've got.
I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but normally I don't even get to do that. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have discussed this one a little bit. It is mind-boggling, and we are going to talk about it. If you guys in the chats know anything about it, please feel free to engage with us as we go. But this case takes place in 1992. So do you want to give us some pop culture references for 1992, BC?
Of course I do. That's what I live for. You'll love to know that ranch becomes the best-selling nation's salad dressing.
Okay, in the chats right now, are you team blue cheese or team ranch?
Yeah. Oh. Ranch is terrible. CDs surpassed cassette tapes in sales in 1992. Arizona iced tea hits the market. Probably didn't know that.
I did not. I guess I thought that might have been from earlier on.
I thought that was from like 4 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Snapple's a big seller. Nobody remembers Snapple.
I do. Do you remember all the Snapple commercials?
Oh, yeah. And never mind. I think there was an incident where Snapple got sued for like a rat or something being found in the bottle, and then maybe later that wasn't quite true.
Do you think that was actually a ploy by the Arizona iced tea people?
Yes, I do.
To get people to thank you.
Yes. And we have the inventor of the McRib became vegan in 1992. I completely made that one up. I'm just joking.
Well, I was gonna say that the McRib had no meat in it anyway. Right. I'm sure.
Yeah, so that was a secret. He was trying to convert people. Blind Melon was I guess they were like debut album.
Oh yeah,
big time selling album. The REM Automatic for the People.
Okay.
Some people like that. Wonder Years and Seinfeld were still top rated shows.
Okay, now let me say this. Mm-hmm. I remember that Seinfeld began, I believe, in 89. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And ran forevermore, which was wonderful. I, for some reason, am not remembering Wonder Years in the same time frame in my brain as Seinfeld. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't either. I can't remember what year Wonder Years debuted. Maybe like 88. I think it was around the time.
Probably around the same time.
Jump Street, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just don't. I think that maybe because I didn't watch Seinfeld when it first came out like that. I watched it a little bit later on. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's why I'm not. I watched Wonder Years earlier on. Probably more like in its original time.
Yeah, I was looking at the cover of a TV Guide, and I think it was from like spring of like May of 92, and it was Wonder Years cover, and it was talking about Seinfeld being the top ranked show. So, you've got those two. Really, really good movie came out in 1992.
What?
Fried Green Tomatoes.
Oh, have you watched it? If you haven't, I suggest you do. I haven't in years. We need to watch it soon. I'm sure it still stands up. It's a fantastic movie. It's Kathy Bates, Cicely Tyson, a ton of people. Oh, what's her? It'll come to me, but it's a great.
Mary, or no. Yeah, whoever was one of the lead characters.
Mm-hmm.
Abby in the chat says the B-Girl video talking about Blind Melon.
Oh, that's right.
But speaking of bees, My Girl came out in 1992.
She says, but he can't see without his glasses. That's the saddest part of the whole.
I don't want to. Oh, crap. I don't want to see it.
It's so sad.
My Cousin Vinny.
Oh, that's a good one. It's a quotable one, too.
Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, I saw that.
Juice. I don't know if y'all know about Juice, but Tupac's in it. Is actually kind of a touching movie. Some young kids doing some things.
Okay. Did they learn their lesson? Are they redeemed?
It's hard to remember, but I think some bad stuff happens. Like, in other words, like if it's what I'm thinking of, and it's been a long time.
I never saw that.
I want to say that someone gets shot, and it's bad. But I mean, the way I remember it, he actually was not a bad actor in that. You know, Cape Fear with Robert De Niro came out, and Sin of a Woman.
Ooh, hoo-ya,
one of the best. We've said it before. The 90s had the best movies.
I agree.
Dialogue in Sin of a Woman, people should study because it's incredible.
90s had the best hip hop too.
Yes, I'll agree with you on that too.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember if I wrote any down. I think House of Pain's Jump Around came out.
Oh, you guys should revisit the Disruptors podcast episode with Danny Boy O'Connor from House of Pain.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime.
Yes. Light Up Shoes from LA Gear.
Oh.
They only sold like 5 million pairs.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
I never had any LA Gears.
Because you were cool.
You better stop.
I'm sorry.
I had Keds.
Yeah, you were cool. That's what I'm saying.
Does that not smudge out the...
Have you ever heard of Ruse? You're pretty young, but there was a pair of shoes called Ruse, short for kangaroos.
Yeah.
And they had a little zipper pocket that supposedly you could put stuff in that little pocket on your shoe.
What did you put in it?
Maybe you could put a penny in there.
Then why wouldn't you just get a penny loafer?
I don't know. Because I was in second grade. I don't know. I never had Ruse, though. I just know they were shoes then.
Everybody in the chats is talking about 9 Inch Nails right now, by the way.
Why?
Because they're saying that 9 Inch Nails Broken came out, and they're all saying that they love 9 Inch Nails.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I can't.
You guys, he's very critical of music. So
very critical.
I'm here to embrace everybody.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not a 9 Inch Nails fan. Although I think Davey, maybe somebody mentioned Tool earlier.
Oh, today in the show? Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was the first record that came out around that time, but yeah, same thing. I can listen to one song of Tool and then I'm out. I can't. Oof. It puts me in like a depressive state. It's not like it's bad. I don't think they're a bad band. I just, ooh.
Fox says, "Come at me." Oh, Abby said, "Dude, they're gonna gang up on you now. You've picked your poison."
I will defend my musical taste until the end. Yeah, I couldn't get into 9 Inch Nails. That's just me. A little too dramatic for me. I like really sincere music.
He's digging a hole, y'all. He's digging in.
Beatles, no go. No like the Beatles, no like the Eagles. Add 9 Inch Nails. But I like 90s country. We did discover that. So.
And you like Bryan Adams.
You better stop now. What do I say about Bryan Adams? What do I call him?
I'm not going to do it because we have lovely listeners from there.
That white shirt wearing, maple syrup drinking, Canadian. Sorry, I couldn't get into Bryan Adams either.
Okay, well, I think our show is done here, guys.
That's enough, I think, for my 90s trivia. Or 90s.
Speaking of trivia, though, we have entertained the idea of every few weeks maybe doing a live trivia. Do you guys like to go to like local bars or restaurants and do trivia? If so, shoot us some messages. Let us know. Because that could be fun. Just like a super short, informal, fun. Maybe pick a decade or pick a topic and do some general trivia. Maybe we could have some prizes. Maybe we could something, right? That could be fun. I like trivia.
Yeah, I do too. I like to cut up in jokes sometimes too.
All right. Well, then we'll make a plan. Let's make it a date.
All right, sorry.
What you thinking about?
How good this LaCroix is.
For somebody who doesn't drink,
I know.
this man.
People see me get silly and they think I'm either drinking or eating an edible or smoking something.
Okay, Abby, I want to hear your reasoning here real quick. She says, don't even say Beatles and Eagles in the same sentence. Does that mean you're a big fan of one and not of the other? We'll wait here.
I don't think anyone should ever say Beatles and Eagles.
James, we're going to do 90s country trivia, and I'm going to make sure that you get all the invites, all the alerts. You guys say happy birthday to James. It's James Barber's birthday today.
Oh, great.
Happy birthday.
I'll tell you this, James. 90s country, you need to revisit it maybe. I don't know. You got some pretty good taste in music, so I was shocked that I had blocked out how good it was, and now I listen to it all the time.
Okay. You ready to get started?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. You guys, tonight we're going to talk to you about a case out of Springfield, Missouri in 1992. Hence why we just did all of the 1992 trivia. Abby came back with the Beatles. I'm assuming that means you are a fan of the Beatles. Oh, wait, is that why you are named Abby in the chats? Is that why?
It could be, right?
Okay, I don't know. Maybe. I'm going to go with that until we know an answer. All right, we're going to be talking about an incident that occurred at 1717 Delmar Street, okay, in Springfield, Missouri on June 6th, 1992. In fact, in the early morning hours of June 7th, very likely. Again, this is unsolved, and it's going to involve victims Sherril Levitt, her daughter Suzie Streeter, and her friend Stacy McCall. All right. So Suzie and Stacy were good friends. Now, reports will tell us later that Stacy used to hang out with this other girl that we're going to talk about in a moment a little bit more, but a few weeks prior to graduation, she and Suzie had really been spending a lot more time together. So Suzie and Stacy were graduating Kickapoo High School there in Springfield, Missouri. So this was a fun time. Like I said, it's June, it's early summer. They're graduating high school, and these girls are super excited. They have a lot of plans, okay? They particularly have plans that night to go to dinner. They have various graduation parties to attend, and they had plans to go the next day to a water park there in town. Now, this water park was known to be a lot of fun for local kids, not super, super cheap, as water parks to this day kind of still are. And so usually it would be, from all accounts that I've read, kind of a special occasion, to go do that, something to celebrate. So that was kind of their plan over the next couple of days for that weekend. So Suzie and Stacy were going to go to a graduation party. And like I said, to the water park about 45 minutes away in Branson. So they were going to go with their friend Janelle. Okay. So Janelle is who Stacy actually had been really hanging out with a lot more, and then just around this time had started kind of spending a little bit more time with Suzie. So their plan was to go drive to Branson, Suzie and Stacy. Now just keep these names straight the best you can. All of these names are going to start with S's, so a lot of alliteration there, but they were going to go to a hotel for the night in Branson and then to that water park in the morning. But at 10:30 that night on the 6th, at 10:30 p.m., Stacy called her mom to say there was a change of plans. They were going to spend the night at Janelle's and just go to the water park in the morning. For whatever reason that night, they were tired, likely because they wanted to go to some of these get-togethers for graduation, and we're going to just wait and hold off until the morning. But first, they decided to go to a party that got broken up due to noise complaints. Then they were going to go stay the night at their friend Brian Joy's house. But at the last minute, they decided not to do that and go to their friend Janelle Kirby's house, the Janelle that I just mentioned. So this is what Stacy was saying when she called her mom, was that they had planned to go to Janelle's and change their plans for the evening a little bit. So immediately after this, Suzie and Stacy went to some parties with some friends. According to police reports, they went to a party at the Grayson residence in Battlefield, Missouri. They left at 2 a.m. So we have witness accounts of them leaving at 2 a.m. They drove a very short distance to Janelle's home, like they had said that they wanted to do. Janelle was expecting them. But when they get there, they see that Janelle's family has a lot of visitors. They had family in town. So it was kind of a packed house, and they didn't really know where they were going to sleep. So Janelle's mom was kind enough to make a pallet. So, kind of some blankets and pillows on the living room floor for Suzie and Stacy to sleep on that night. Excuse me. But when the girls started to get settled in, they changed their minds yet again and decided to go on back to Suzie's house for the night and not kind of stay where it was cramped at Janelle's. So they thought they'd be more comfortable at Suzie's house. Suzie had actually just gotten a brand new waterbed as her graduation present. BC, have you ever had a waterbed?
No. We had this discussion recently. I never had one, never understood why people had them. And it was one of those things where it seemed more like a status symbol, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know. I never understood them. But apparently they sold a lot of them back then.
Yeah, I think they were pretty popular.
Yeah.
Like the giant big screen TVs. Do you remember those big bricks, like 5 feet across? It takes up half the living room. Those, to me, I equate those same as kind of a waterbed because they're just kind of heavy and big,
Yeah.
But I think they were pretty popular at the time. I always wished I had one. I didn't have one, but I thought they'd be so much fun when I was a kid. So Suzie had just gotten this new waterbed for graduation, and so they were going to just go chill there for the night. So they drive separately. Now, this is something that people kind of wonder why this whole night, since they knew that they were going to be going to these different places, why are they driving separately? Now, it's unclear if they drove separately to each destination that led up to Janelle's house. I don't know if they staged one of their cars at Janelle's house because they knew they'd ultimately be there for the night once they decided that plan or not. Nothing really indicates that specifically. Either way, they are each in their cars driving separately back to Suzie's house once they left Janelle's. Okay. So this is around, I believe, 2:17 a.m. they left Janelle's because when they left the Grayson residence that I said they stopped at, they were only there briefly, or they were there for a while, left it to quick drive to Janelle's. We're only there for a few minutes. The mom made the pallet. They decided to bolt. So around 2:17 a.m., they leave Janelle's house to go to Suzie's home, again, driving separately. Okay. So they were all supposed to call each other the next morning to link up to go to that water park. Janelle was going to go as well. So Janelle, the next morning, doesn't hear anything from Suzie or Stacy. Remember, guys, 1992. Okay. They didn't have their cell phones. They're not texting. We often talk about this, and we talk about the idea not only was that capability not there, but also the desire or the need of this immediate gratification wasn't there. I think we all had a little bit more patience. So you didn't hear from somebody. You're just kind of waiting a little while. You're not immediately texting to see where they are and what time you're going. So they kind of wait, they being Janelle and her boyfriend, Mike. They're waiting around a little while. They don't hear anything back from Suzie or Stacy. They've called the house, Suzie's home, the landline, and no one's answering the phone. So finally, after they call him for a while in the morning, there are differing accounts that say either between 11 or 12:30, Janelle and her boyfriend, Mike, go to Suzie's. So when they get there, they notice all 3 cars are in the driveway, meaning Suzie's mother, Sherril, Suzie's car, and Stacy's car. So all 3 cars are present. They did note that Suzie was not parked where she usually is. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. That may not seem like a big deal, but we're all kind of creatures of habit. We all park a certain way in our driveway, and it was enough to stand out to them, the fact that Suzie's car is usually always in this one spot, and it wasn't that morning. So they see all the cars in the driveway, and they go over to the front door. Well, the front door is unlocked, which wasn't necessarily unheard of at that time and for that family. The one thing they did notice that caught their eye was that the globe to the porch light, so not the bulb itself, but the glass dome, around the bulb, was shattered. And there were glass shards all over the ground there on the patio. Okay, but keep in mind the light bulb itself was intact. So whatever shattered the globe did not affect the light bulb. And if you're making a note of that,
I am.
okay, then we're going to talk about that in a moment. Good. My little secretary. So Mike decides, you're not even listening, are you?
Oh, go ahead.
So Mike, I just called you my secretary. So Mike decided to take a broom that was there. They just went on in the house and they felt comfortable doing so. These were all good friends. So Mike goes on and grabs a broom and sweeps up the shards of glass there on the pavement or on the concrete. Okay. He walks them across the street. There's a dentist building over there and there's like a dumpster outside, and he dumps the glass in that dumpster over there across the street. So like I said, the front door was unlocked. There was nothing really unusual or of any alarming nature for them at this point. So they go inside, start calling out everyone's names, and no one's answering them. They're walking from room to room. They can't find either one of the girls or Susie's mother, Sherril. So as they continue to walk through the house, this was, I believe, a split level house. So if you're not familiar, you kind of walk in, there's your base, like foyer, if you will, and you can choose to then go upstairs, usually into like a living area, or downstairs into bedrooms, or vice versa. So they walk through the house. They realize pretty quickly that no one's home. No one's in bed. No one's walking around. No one's out back. So they're a little confused. Like I said, the cars were all there. So they look down and they realize that the stairs leading to Susie's room, kind of near a living room area, they see a couple of purses. Well, they realize it's all three of the women's purses. So they're all lined up, basically, in this area leading near Susie's bedroom toward the living room. Eventually, we find out that Sherril's purse, the mother, had $900 cash in it, probably from work. She was a hairdresser. It wasn't unusual for her to have cash in her wallet. But what does that tell us? That we're likely not looking at a robbery, right? At least from the get-go. Stacy had pretty bad migraines that she'd suffered from for quite a while. And so she had this migraine medication that she considered basically a necessity. She took it with her everywhere she went. Her migraine medicine was in her purse as well. Okay. So Sherril and Suzie were both, quote, chain smokers. To anyone who knew them, they were basically nowhere to be found if their cigarettes were not with them. But both of their packs of cigarettes and lighters were in each of their purses. Okay. So Stacy's shorts, let's go on into the bedroom now. If you go into Susie's bedroom, Stacy's shorts were folded neatly. They were lying on top of her shoes. They were next to the waterbed. Her jewelry had been kind of like neatly tucked into her shorts pocket. There was a damp cloth in the hamper that indicated that someone had removed makeup. She also had a brand new Victoria's Secret bra that she had lying on top of her shorts. So it was like shoes, shorts with jewelry tucked in it, bra. Like I said, neatly. Nothing is in disarray here. So they're neatly sitting beside the bed, and then a damp makeup-laden cloth in the hamper, in the dirty hamper. So Susie's jewelry was on the sink. The only clothing of Stacy's that was not accounted for were her yellow t-shirt and her underwear. We're going to talk about that. So if you go into Sherril, the mother's bedroom, it looked slept in. So her eyeglasses were on the bedside table. There was an open book turned over on the table to indicate that, you know, she's reading to go to bed, and lays her book down to roll over and go to sleep. Now, there were two slats in the blinds in Susie's room that did make it look as though someone had been looking out the window. So in the living room, the TV was on. It was playing static. For those of you who may be a bit too young to understand that, usually around, it was midnight, I believe, right, BC?
Yes.
When whatever regularly scheduled programming would go off, midnight TV goes off. So it's like lights out. It would go to either like the color bar screen. Do you remember the color bar?
Yeah.
Or just a black and white static. Countless times, I think my father has fallen asleep on the couch when I was a kid, and you know, you get up to go to the bathroom and you hear the whooshing of static. So the TV was on, but again, it had gone to static. Let's see here. So there was a dog named Cinnamon. It was a little Yorkie, okay, a Yorkshire Terrier, was present and was whining. The phone rang while Janelle and Mike are inside. It rang twice, in fact. Both times it was a male voice. Both times Janelle answered. And both times the male voice uttered lewd comments. To this day, we don't have reports of what was said. We just know that like some lewd comments were made. We've talked about this before back then. It's funny to think of the 90s as back then, but back then, these prank calls were not necessarily unheard of. You guys, we just didn't have a lot to do. Okay. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it wasn't necessarily cause for like just crazy alarm. I think just about anybody knew someone who had these kinds of calls. But so they say that these two calls come in. Again, Janelle was the one to answer both of them. So later on, Stacy's mother is wondering why she hasn't heard from her. So she calls Suzie's house over and over and over because she knew Stacy had been with Suzie and she's not getting an answer. She actually leaves voicemails on the answering machine or messages, I should say. And there's a time, if you listen to her in an interview, she'll say that as the day wore on and as she continued to leave messages, when she went back and heard them, you can hear her voice getting a bit more frantic with each message that she left. So she's calling around and she calls another friend. Finally, she calls a friend who said that they were at something about they had been with Janelle. So she doesn't know Janelle's number or whatever. So she gets that number from another friend's mother, calls Janelle, who says, yeah, we went over there, but like, they're not there. The cars are there, whatever. And so she's a little, irritated at first, Susie's mother, saying that, why didn't you let me know? And Janelle says, well, I didn't want to worry you. We just didn't know exactly where they were. So a little time goes by and Stacy's mother decides to go to Susie's herself to see if she can figure out what's going on or see the girls. So she gets there. Same thing happens. Doors unlocked. She goes in. She can't find anyone. They're all a bit alarmed at the idea that the cars are out front. So when she's there, she listens to, she sees that there's a answering machine light is beeping. Again, if you're not familiar with those back then, before we had voicemail and things like that, when you would call on a landline, had an answering machine hooked up, if you get home from work that day and the light is blinking, it indicates that someone's left you a message on it. So she pushes the button to play the messages. When she does, she hears a male voice that had left a message on the answering machine that said something that she called very rude, like, quote, rude is what Stacy's mother said. Mm-hmm. And now when she played that message, it inadvertently deleted it. So some of the machines were set up that way to once you play it, it deletes that message. So no one else has heard that message but Stacy's mother. But one thing that we will say is that police have later stated to this day that they believe that the first two calls that Janelle answered like live and someone spoke to her is a different caller than whoever left the message on the answering machine. We don't know why. They've not clarified to the public why that would be.
I made a note. It's probably when they track down, I would assume, phone records.
Okay.
And then just see who's calling that landline. And then you just follow up on it. Like back then when they would do like reverse directories and go, okay, this number's listed at this location. It could be a teenager being silly or something. And somehow they can prove that these are not the same person.
Well, so then let me ask you this, I guess. In saying that, then that would have us assume that they located or identified the individuals who left those messages.
You would think so. Oh, yeah.
Because if that's the case, every report you read still talks about these calls as though they're the mystery. They're part of the mystery, maybe. Now, understand that we are all speculating here, but I guess had police identified the callers and ruled them out as suspects, I don't know if this would still be such a talking point in the story, right?
Yeah, right. Or they could still be suspects. They're just not going to release any of that information.
Oh, true.
And
like say their names or say anything other than just to say we think they're different callers.
Yes. Yeah. Or sometimes things can get misconstrued if like a news channel or someone is going over search warrants that have been returned to the clerk's office and it becomes public record and they read that then it, not that they always get it wrong, but like if they then say, these phone numbers are whatever, not related, or they're not whatever, it may be worded a certain way in a search warrant or something, or court order, where it kind of gets lost in translation, where then as the reader, we then assume, oh, that means they're not the same person, or they're not the suspect, or whatever. But yeah.
Okay, I gotcha. Well, so that's kind of that's essentially the idea of what happened. So on June 8th, the next day, police obtained a search warrant and began combing through the house. Again, they found no signs of struggle. There was no blood present, nothing missing that they could tell, except for Stacy's yellow shirt, t-shirt, and underwear. Okay. And that's pretty much all we've got. I'm going to read to you a little bit about where police were in that investigation before we get on to some of the leads or theories or suspects in this case. So we have the 3 theories that police came up with as they began to investigate this. The first, bless you, James, take a drink. The first theory they have would be that Sherril Levitt, the mother, was the target. So if that was the case, she was the only one of the 3 that were expected to be at the house that night. Remember, the girls were not planning to be there. So, I mean, unbeknownst to everyone else, they came home, but their plan, according to everyone, including the mothers, until late that night, was to go to Branson and stay in that hotel room before going to the water park the next day. So if the intended target was the mother, if it's someone who knew the mother or knew the family, they would expect her to be alone that night. Okay. A second theory would be that Suzie, let's think about if Suzie, the daughter that lived there, was the target. She hung out with a crowd that was questionably trouble. It depends on who you're talking to or what reports you read. But I think that there's no mistake in the fact that maybe some of her friends were a little bit more rough around the edges than some of Stacy's friends. So that's kind of, there's not a big angle there, but if you're looking at Suzie being the target, you could kind of work it that way. And then there's also the idea that the crime could have been random. There's not a big theory behind Stacy being really the target in this situation. She didn't live at the home. She wasn't expected to be at the home that night. If it was random, they've said that it could be a sexual sadist was driving around Springfield looking for a victim. He saw Suzie and Stacy driving past in their little red cars. Suzie leading the way with her personalized license plate, Sweeter, it was SWEETR, and potentially followed them to the house on Del Mar. Police do say that one person with a gun could have subdued the women without a struggle. An FBI profiler has said that one person probably committed the crime. According to that profile, if there was a second person, he or she might not have known they were getting involved in this crime until it actually happened. So that was kind of the FBI's take on it once they decided to make a profile. They also think that this could have been someone who pulled people into thinking that he's mild. Okay. There's a lot of quotes in here because this is per the profile. So, quote, people who know the suspect may not believe that he is capable of committing this type of crime. He may not have had a history of committing crimes of violence. There's no general agreement among the investigators. It's not like they have one big idea or lead or broad theory that we know of that they are all in agreement with. And some think that they might be buried in the Mark Twain National Forest. Now, before I get into these theories and suspects more specifically, BC, did you have anything that you wanted to add? If you just don't know, BC, Sanders is a retired homicide lieutenant, so he always has a good bit of insight when we talk about these investigations.
So when they do the victimology for all 3 and try to figure out their pattern of activity and what's predicted and where they should be and where they shouldn't be, meaning their timelines for daily activity. Like you said, if they're focusing on the mother, the adult, that was supposed to be at that house, the other 2 girls would have been variables that nobody really would have known unless the suspect is closely linked to them. Right. So then you have to look at if the mother is expected to be there at the home, who would have the motive to attack her or at least remove her from that home?
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, people go, "Oh, of course, genius," but it's when you start to work and you start to look at it, you do have to say, if this is completely random,
Start at baseline. Yeah.
Exactly. Like why? You don't really go random. You go what makes sense. And so when I know you're gonna potentially get more into the crime scene, but the way you describe the crime scene and that sort of thing, it doesn't appear to just be completely stranger. Sorry, I don't want to get ahead of you.
You're totally fine.
But that that sort of thing. So you're looking at any kind of motive for who would go into the home. And a lot of times when people talk about FBI profilers, they don't show up on like day one usually. You know what I mean? Like, so they come in, and a lot of people that listen to your show read the books and know that, and you are well versed on it. So I'm just saying this for other people who are listening. When they come in, usually by then, most of the agencies that are working it have already exhausted their leads. They're kind of running out of potential leads, or at least need that kind of support. That's
right.
All. So sometimes I think the way we read things, it jumps completely to an FBI profile, but that's usually one of the last steps.
Sure. And I believe it was said, and you can clarify this from like your knowledge of these kinds of investigations, but that to the best of my knowledge, the FBI was brought in a bit more promptly here, but mainly because it was 3 victims. We have 3 missing people without a trace as far as we know. And that's just, this is a bit more unheard of. And that's why I say this case is so, mind-boggling, because as we know, it's not always easy to get one person. If you listen to any true crime stuff, you enjoy this stuff, you're here. So I think that you probably do. Then you know that even to get one person and successfully cause them to go missing, potentially, successfully murder them, successfully dispose of the remains in a way that this many years later, this will be the 26th year. No, excuse me, the 36th year. That was 1992. No, that's 26.
Yes,
8 and 4. What year is it right now? 2024?
Yeah.
Yeah. And 8. Yes, 32.
32.
Good grief.
Yeah.
This will be the 32nd. Either way, my point is, if you're going to successfully do any of these things, right, for any amount of time with one person, one victim, that's going to be difficult. With 2, that's incredibly difficult. We've got some unsolved with 2 victims, but they were with bodies that were found. So the ones I'm going to think of immediately are going to be Bill and Peggy Stevenson and the Delphi girls. And then, but to have it be 3, be unsolved 32 years later.
So
and not only, I'm sorry, well, I was going to say not only unsolved, but also no remains found.
So what would that tell you about the suspect?
I feel like it's somebody they know.
Yeah, I do too. Because the way you laid out the crime scene, nothing seems disturbed. You've got purses laid out with things. Apparently, no one went through them. You know what I mean? Like, I guess.
Or didn't need to.
It sounds like someone was taking their makeup off. So you have the damp cloth. All these small things in crime scenes that you really have to pay attention to, because then you can say, okay, well, this cloth wouldn't be damp. Why has it got makeup on it? Oh, well.
Right.
And everything lays out like that. The book.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about. So when I mentioned that some believe that they could be buried in the Mark Twain forest, that's going to butt us up to our first potential suspect. Okay. So there was a guy named Stephen Eugene Garrison. We, Drew Breezy and I used to make a joke, and it often comes to light when we talk about these cases. Whenever we're talking about the bad guy per se, it's like a 3-named person. But Stephen Eugene Garrison actually wouldn't have been the bad guy in this situation, but he was already arrested on weapons charges back in 1993. So he made a deal to get his charges reduced by squealing. All right. So he's saying that he has information on the Springfield 3 and that his friend drunkenly confessed to killing them. He said he had a piece of information that has not been released publicly, and that this showed it has been shown to have some validity to his claims. So he was released And he was supposed to be meeting. I love this part of this. I don't love this part of the story, but it's an interesting part. So he was released and was supposed to be meeting up with the investigators. So they let him out. Again, it was some weapons charges. It wasn't necessarily a violent assault or anything like that, but they let him out. And then he goes on the lam. So he's supposed to meet up with the investigators to show them where he thinks he knows what happened to these women were. He's on the run for 3 weeks. During this time, unfortunately, he breaks into the apartment of a 20-year-old university student and rapes her. Mm-hmm. They do catch him. So once they catch him, this leads police to this farmland. So once he gets to the farmland, he says that the 3 women were buried there and that there would be a green van nearby. Now, we're going to talk about this green van in a moment. Years earlier, the owner of this property that he took them to was accused of murdering 3 people after a drug deal had gone bad. So evidently, bodies were never discovered because evidently this guy named Ron, who owned this property, and a partner of his burned the bodies, placed their ashes in containers, and spread them throughout the county. In 1990, Ron pled guilty to 2 of these murders, his partner to the other one. Ron died in prison in 1995. So this would have been 3 years after the girls went missing. Okay. They searched the property, did not turn up the bodies or the green van. Again, don't let me forget to talk about that one, but it did turn up something. A judge put a gag order on the search and no details have been released publicly. Again, this guy died in 1995 and there is still, as far as I can tell, and I dug deep again prepping for this case tonight, as we revisit it, there's still a gag order on whatever they found on that property. So we don't know what it is. It's never been made public, but the green van. So there have been a few witness sightings saying that around 7:30 the morning of June 7th, a green van was seen in that area on Delmar Street where Suzie and Sherril lived. Okay. And it says that it looks like someone actually said that it looked like Stacy, I believe, was driving the van under duress. She looked like she was taking commands from a man in the passenger seat. There are varying reports on whether or not the man in the passenger seat had a gun, but there were enough people to kind of come forward with this green van idea that police actually got a matching green van, one to the best of that description, and put it out front of the police station, hoping to garner tips.
Okay.
So this man, this Stephen Eugene Garrison, says that if you search this dude's property, you're going to find that green van and their bodies. Like I said, to no avail, but they found something. Now, we don't even know necessarily there was something related to this case, right? We just know they found something that they put a gag order on. So if he was already implicated in some other murders, who knows? I mean, it could be a whole separate murder case or anything else, but that's something. So that's one of our potential suspects. Now we have the brother. So Bart Streeter is Suzie's brother. Suzie actually had been living with Bart in an apartment not too long before this, but Bart was known for his alcohol abuse. We were talking in public, in private. He could get violent. He was just kind of a dummy with that stuff. He's long since talked about it. It's not a secret. But because of this, he and Suzie had some, some tiffs about all this. They weren't too fond of each other at this moment. So she leaves the apartment she was sharing with him to go back to live with her mother. And that's when she was living with her mother before all of this happened. So there are people who want to implicate her brother Bart in this. Evidently, he has a long history, like I said, of alcohol abuse and some rocky relationships with his sister and his mother over the years. Evidently, they became, like, they got in a physical tussle. Suzie, that's like a think back. Suzie and Bart. And so that was prior to her moving out and moving back in with her mom. So Bart was one of the first suspects in this case. They quickly ruled him out because his girlfriend confirmed his alibi, and he passed a polygraph. If you listen to enough of these, we do not put a lot of weight in polygraphs. we often talk about the totality or the whole, the whole picture. And a polygraph can be a piece, it can be a tool, but there's a reason they don't, they're not admissible in court. There's a reason we don't hang a lot of weight on this. Either way, he passed the polygraph for better or for worse, and his girlfriend confirmed his alibi. Again, was she honest or not? We don't know. But that's what we've got. And then he, because of that, was pretty quickly ruled out as a suspect in this case. So let's move it along to our next suspect. And I want to hear what y'all's thoughts are on this as we get into it a little further. But Robert Craig Cox. Again, we got three names. Three names. Robert Craig Cox was a former Army Ranger. When he was 19, you guys listen closely. When he was 19, in the year 1978, he became prime suspect in the death of 19-year-old Sharon Zeller. She left her job at Disney World and she was driving home. So she was missing for 6 days when she left work. Her body was found and she had 14 head wounds. Her skull was dented in, fractured. She was found stuffed in a sewage lift station. This was about less than 400 yards away from a motel where Robert was living with his parents at the time. The same night Sharon was murdered, Robert had come back to his parents at the motel, and his mother immediately rushed him to the hospital. His tongue was missing at least a full inch off the end of it. It had been bitten off. An artery was severed in the process. We know how much a tongue bleeds naturally when it's cut, much less if an artery is severed, right? So an artery was severed in this process, and he was losing massive amounts of blood. He could not talk. They get to the hospital, and his tongue was surgically repaired. But Robert stated that he had gotten into a fist fight at the skating rink, and when he was punched, it caused him to bite his tongue. Okay. Later, a surgical tech will state there was no way this was from him biting his own tongue. This had to have been from someone else due to the curvature of the bite. Okay, so this took a long time to build a case in this matter. So, in fact, he didn't even go on trial for about a decade, by which time he was then serving time for 2 separate incidences from 1985 when he had assaulted 2 separate women, and each one had managed to escape from him. He was extradited to Florida. He was found guilty of Sharon's murder and sentenced to death. Okay, so the conviction was then overturned the following year by the Florida Supreme Court, who said the jury didn't have enough to convict him. He was extradited back to California to continue serving the remainder of the assault charge conviction. Then when Sharon's family heard of the Springfield 3 case, so the victim was Sharon, the one that he had been initially convicted of murdering, her family hears about the Springfield 3 case, and they brought Sharon's murder and Robert's name to the attention of law enforcement in Missouri. Come to find out, Robert at one point worked as a mechanic where Stacy's father was a salesman. So this puts Robert on location where Stacy's father, presumably where Stacy would be hanging around, okay? Robert's alibi at the time was that he was spending the night with his parents the night that the 3 Springfield girls went missing. His parents do corroborate this alibi. However, we know that they did say that they slept the entire night. And we know that the Springfield 3 were presumed to have gone missing between 2:30 and 8 a.m. over that night. So take their corroboration of his alibi for what you will, okay? So his girlfriend at the time did agree that his alibi was solid when he said he then went to church with her the next day. But she later recants this, saying that he told her to say that. I also am not going to get hung up on somebody lying about an alibi necessarily, because we know that people do that often. And it doesn't mean they're guilty of the crime in question, right? Because maybe they're just doing some other nefarious stuff. So she said he told her to say that. They didn't have enough evidence. He eventually moved away. But in 1995, he held a gun to the head of a 12-year-old girl during an aggravated burglary. He was convicted of this and sentenced to 30 years of consecutive sentences combined with his other assault charges, right? And he was eligible for parole in the year 2025. So y'all get ready, because Robert Craig Cox is still alive. He at first maintained innocence of the Springfield 3, but now he says they were murdered. He says that Sherril was the intended target. And he said that the remains were buried nearby, but would never be found. He refuses a polygraph of the matter, and he refuses any more interviews on it. He says he won't give away any more information about the case until his mother passes away, and she is now in her 80s. And everything I have searched and searched, I cannot find anywhere anything that states that she has yet passed away. Or that he's budged in what he's saying. Do you think he's just saying these things for fun to tease people because he's been in prison for a long time?
Do we know when he made those statements? What year approximately?
Let me see.
The only reason I say that is he doesn't have any reason to, if he has a chance of getting out in 2025.
Well, because he's not in prison for murder, right? He's in prison for aggravated assault. So why would you confess to a murder?
Right. Yes. So,
Yeah, I don't know when he said it. It just, all accounts say like around the mid 2000s, 15, 16, 17. Yeah. The verbiage is now he says that. So,
well, that's the only reason I say that is that anytime somebody provides information from inside of a correctional facility, it's usually because they want some type of sentence reduction. Right. Or they at least want to get transferred or they want something out of it. But we're talking about, kidnapping and murder of 3 women.
Yeah.
So it's kind of counterintuitive to do that. And we know people will falsely confess to get more attention, or they want to be feared more within a prison, the correctional facility. Or sometimes people just crave that attention and start to, go down that path of saying very general statements. All I know is that they're dead. Well, you can come back later and go, why'd you say that? They said, well, because it would make sense, but I don't know anything about the case.
Right.
Or he could say, well, I know more about it. It wasn't me, but I heard.
So we were just saying that essentially there would be no reason for Robert Craig Cox to confess to the murder of these 3 when he was he was serving a long consecutive sentences for some assault charges that were pretty severe. However, they are still lesser than a sentence for 3 kidnappings and murders. So there would be nothing to behoove him to admit to those because it would not shorten or lessen his sentence or cause him a deal in any kind of way. So that's the Robert Craig Cox theory. There was another one that I find to be interesting is that a local reporter suggested that the 3 might be buried beneath the parking lot at the Cox Hospital. She says that she received many, many calls and tips about this. And in 2007, a specialist that used the ground penetrating radar, we've talked about that before in cases, did locate 3 abnormalities in the area, right? So they take this special radar that can bust through concrete and these kinds of things. They take it to the parking garage of that hospital, the Cox Memorial Hospital, and they do find what they consider to be 3 abnormalities under that concrete. We don't have any more specifics than that, other than I have read accounts that say, like, quote, human size. Okay. So, I don't know how detailed, how specific that technology is, but they found that police officers still say there's not enough evidence to bust up and excavate that parking lot based on this finding from the ground penetrating radar. Okay. So, I will say that in looking into it, that parking garage was complete in the year. It was a new one, and it was complete in the year that the women went missing. Now, what I want to know more specifically is when did the construction start? At what stage of construction was it in when the ladies went missing? Because maybe most of it was complete by then, but not this one area. There's just not a lot. There wasn't much more follow-up on that other than that they found these abnormalities. Mm-hmm. It would be too costly. There wasn't enough to go off of to justify breaking that up. But there are a lot of people who consider that to be a fairly significant piece. Unfortunately, it's one that's significant enough that you want to follow up on it, but not significant enough to follow up in the way they would have to know the answer.
Yeah, you'd also have to look at your tips coming in. If an investigation, if they release information that says we've had 5 tips come in, that those could be tips from the same person.
This
you know
is
what
true.
I mean? So if you're getting multiple tips from different sources, then it can sometimes add credibility to that. So you have to wonder, when the original tip came out, how would anybody know 3 bodies are under there unless they're somehow linked to suspect or suspects? Obviously, I mean, we know that. But
right. Well, and I guess my piece there is that I can't find anywhere about police getting these tips. I keep finding that this news reporter got the tips.
Okay. Right.
So that's the part that makes it less weighty for me.
Yeah.
Another theory we have, what's a story without some good old-fashioned grave robbing? Because Susie's ex-boyfriend and his friend, this would be Dustin Rekla and Michael Clay, they were a part of a, quote, grave robbing gang. So mainly what they were doing is stealing gold teeth from these graves and jewelry, cashing them in. They did take a couple of skulls to put on their mantle. I'm not kidding. They thought it was, it was a funny thing for them or whatever. Evidently, though, she had broken up with him and she knew of this stuff. She had seen the evidence from it, and she was actually subpoenaed and set to testify 2 weeks after her disappearance in their trial for this. I say trial, but in their court proceedings with this. Ultimately, they were convicted of misdemeanors for this. We've talked about this. I don't find this one too credible. It doesn't really... I don't know. It doesn't feel so strong to me. I mean, I understand, like, we've talked about pack mentality and that kind of thing. Like, if one guy, maybe he was doing something a bit more nefarious than grave robbing, and now he thinks, Dustin's girlfriend knows about some stuff and they want to shut her up before she testifies, and they kind of freak out because they think maybe she knows more than she does. I think that's plausible. I find it less plausible that this group of teenage boys that are grave robbing are going to be successful in the disappearance and murder of 3 victims this many years later, and not one of them talk, not one of them know, or let anyone know.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a group of them. It could have been the one in that ring that she was linked to. You know what I mean? Or it could have been them. In that sense, meaning like just one offender or 2 or 3, however many were in that little group. It does kind of say something when, instead of just going out there and breaking into cars or, committing fraud, you're out there digging up graves or breaking into mausoleums and stealing, gold teeth and skulls.
True.
All I'm saying is that you're quite comfortable with
the idea of death.
Deceased bodies. Yes.
So. True. I just find it hard that the unsolved portion and it being 3 victims. I think if it were 1 victim,
the only reason that I made notes on them is because if you look at the crime scene, it does look like
they knew
somebody kind of came in. Yes, I mean, but they were all getting ready for bed.
Right.
So if by chance they let someone in, it'd have to be someone they knew. I would assume if he showed up and knocked on the door and she saw who he was, she would know better than to answer the door because that brings us to the light. So the dome light.
I'm going to talk about that light. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. I'll wait. Go ahead.
No, you don't have to wait. But I do have a theory on that one too. So that's that about that. We talked about the green van theory, So, okay, about the light, what I was going to say is, what if that's just a coincidence? The light bulb's not broken. Those old flimsy, some of them are held in place by like a bracket. Some are screwed in. What if it literally just fell out of the socket it was being held in and crashed to the ground? Or maybe it had, I don't know the last time Janelle and Mike were there. Maybe it had happened the day prior and just no one had cleaned it up yet.
So that's what I was going to say. When you look at a crime scene, then that would tell you, was this dome broken from like the bottom? Did someone like hit it and it cracked, but everything's in the ring, like you're saying, however the fixture is?
Or had the whole thing just fallen?
The whole freak accident.
Nothing specifies that
right.
that we have.
So when I was a kid, freak accident, my cousin was making fun of me, lifting weights over my head. He drops them and it shakes the house, and a dome falls just like you're talking about from the ceiling, that glass, and shatters.
Okay.
So if you look at it and it looks like it has been broken, but all of the ring or the threads are still in the light fixture, but the bulb is intact.
Then it's been hit. Right.
Right. So then you could say, does anyone, when you're doing victimology in crime scene, who knows about the last time this light was intact? Because the people that show up over there, they may be able to say, this is new. We were just here yesterday.
Right.
And we didn't have to step over glass or fragments. So two things. One, someone may have broken it during the daytime hours thinking when I come back, the light will already be out, thinking that they have broken the light bulb as well. But then again, you got to think all that glass or whatever we say, all of that, it may not be that much, is on the ground in the same path as you walk into the door. You would think that's going to alert somebody potentially. So it may be as someone approaches, they pop that light like at night, but they don't know because the light's not on. They don't want the person who's going to answer the door to turn on the light to see who's on the porch. But again, those you'd be able to know more about when you're looking at the crime scene to confirm. Because you're right, it could be a complete accident.
Yeah. So another thing to consider is, what if they weren't? We keep talking about it like someone, lured them at gunpoint or what, but what if they weren't taken alive? So what if Sherril was dead when Suzie and Stacy got home and they don't know it because she's still in her bed with whoever did it? There are some thoughts that she could have had a client that had become obsessed with her. Maybe she invited someone over for the night. Remember, in that profile, they say it could be someone that they knew that they didn't know was capable of this kind of violence. So it could be that whoever did this, that Sherril was the intended target and Sherril was dead. And then now he's got to get out or freaks out and kills these two because he had not expected these two to be home. Now, I think the part about that would get a little suspicious is the fact that they at least got in the door enough to take their clothes off, fold them, put them away. Everything accounts, everything points to they had laid down in the bed. So they had washed off makeup. If they're exhausted, we're talking, in 5 to 8 minutes, those girls are out of their clothes, change of clothes, wash off their makeup. That could account for why Stacy's shirt and underwear were missing because she might have still had them on, likely still had them on laying in the bed, but still had them on when her body was taken out of the house. Not necessarily to point to like a sexual assault, and that's why her clothes were missing as a souvenir. That could fall either way, I guess. But if Sherril was already dead, and then he's, oh gosh, I got 2 more, and he waits till they're a little more subdued or lays down, maybe. I don't know. But maybe that would explain the non-fuss of getting 3 people out of the house because he's just carrying them out one by one, and it's in the middle of the night, and no neighbors have seen a thing.
Yes.
Yes.
Very much so. The fact that the television is on, and like we talked about static, that means your TV's running, and
like Sherril had already fallen asleep before. The last we hear from Sherril is at 11:17. She was on the phone with a friend talking about the next day's activities and got off of the phone at 11:17. So that's the last time she spoke to someone that we know of.
And now you had mentioned her car was moved or was not in the
that was Suzie's. That's one of the thoughts is that when Stacy and Suzie arrived to Suzie's home, since Suzie didn't park where she usually was, potentially was someone else's vehicle where Suzie would normally park.
Yeah.
Another thought is a neighbor. That would play to the idea that the prank phone calls came pretty soon after Janelle and Mike walked in the door. It could just be coincidence. We know there was another one left on the machine, even if they're not related. But it could be that a neighbor was enjoying the idea, watching through blinds, watching people arrive to the home, and making those calls then just for kind of scare factor. In 1997, Sherril and Suzie's family had them declared dead. So 5 years after this happened. Stacy's mother is still alive, in declining health at this point, but she has no plans to do this with Stacy. I do have here Mark Webb. He's the Bolivar police chief, The Springfield Police Department investigation is still active, urging people with any information to call Crime Stoppers at 417-869-TIPS. That's TIPS, or go online to P, like Papa 3 Tips, TIPS.com. He explained that the missing women's case profoundly affected the department's operation. Again, guys, keep in mind this was 1992 in Springfield. So he says, quote, "It impacted the way that the police department conducted investigations. We were still in the forefront of computers and technology at that time, and I think that case helped expedite the progression of new technology to the police department. Keep in mind this incident happened long before DNA or the way we use it now, right? So it's a different world now. Back then, the volume of tips and information kind of overwhelmed our capacity. It was a new experience for all of our investigators and the department. A lot of our officers had their lives turned upside down because all of our resources were committed to this incident for several months, and a lot of adjustments had to be made." He says it goes on to say that it also had a profound emotional impact on the officers as well. And he says, quote, "A lot of us had families. I myself had 2 daughters. And when you start to personalize it, you realize it's not somebody's computer or car that's been stolen. It's their child. The impact was felt throughout the police department, and it was one of the most serious things that most of us had been involved in up to that point in our careers." And I think that that's something that we need to carry with us. Most of the cases we cover, or quite a lot of them, we often talk about cases that happen in areas that don't have, even present day in 2024, it still may be a department that doesn't have experience or doesn't have a history of dealing with something that would shake them in the way that something like this does. And so I think we need to keep that in mind as we discuss how investigations are handled. But everything points to they did everything they could on this one. I like that they took that green van and put it in front of the police department to garner tips. They're trying to think outside the box a little bit with best they had. I mean,
that's the first time I've actually heard of that. And that may have been a technique back then that they would do a lot. But I like
just
that.
To jog memory.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm terrible with vehicle ID anyway.
Well, and there
so
were,
if I can see a green van,
right?
Well,
and immediately upon this kind of breaking out and Stacy's mom realizing that this is actually a big deal, she put flyers up. It's talked about in the sense that, like, up until recent years, you could find torn flyers everywhere. Like, there were flyers everywhere concerning this case. And she actually will, anecdotally reference it in the sense that when she called, she was trying to find the non-911 number. Now, they will say that in Springfield, we have John from Com Center in the chats. He can talk on this a little bit, but in 1992 in Springfield, Missouri, 911 was fairly newer in terms of, or they kind of made a big deal to say, like, don't everybody call, like, really only use it for emergencies, which we should anyway. But, now I think people are much more readily available and willing to call 911. But back then it was very, very stressed to only use it for emergency purposes. So she didn't know, Stacy's mother, that is, when she got to Suzie's home that day, she didn't know whether to consider this an emergency or not. So she calls around and they say, well, why don't you call 911? And she was like, well, because I don't know if this is an emergency. I just need to report, like, them as missing. And so they proceed to put the flyers up and do all the things. And it became a large investigation early on. And like I said, pretty early on, the FBI was actually called in to assist. But it's wild to me. Tomorrow, I will put up pictures of the ladies, the tip line numbers and websites and things like that. There are age progression photos all over the internet. Look into it as much as you want to. There's about 1,000 Reddit rabbit holes you can go down and investigate this with. But take a look and see about, what you think. What do you think is the most likely suspect or theory for you? You may not even have a suspect in mind, but a theory. Again, I'll put all this on the Andrea Up Late page on Instagram tomorrow. But do you have any thoughts on it? But
well, yeah, but I was curious if they ever, normally they wouldn't release information, but anything about fingerprints or when they processed the crime scene, were there any foreign objects there, as in cigarette butts?
So there was nothing that they could find that didn't belong to the home.
Okay.
And there was nothing that they could find that should have been there outside of Stacy's shirt and underwear.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as Chief Webb stated in that sentence, or in that quote, that they didn't have the DNA capabilities, obviously, in 1992. But so in terms of what they could, I'm sure they fingerprinted and these kinds of things. I say I'm sure. I would assume that, they would have done the fingerprint dusting and things like that. They seem to have investigated everything. But there was nothing. There's talk somewhere of potential, like a shoe print that they kind of found.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much follow-up on that for us anyway. But no, in terms of anything being out of place or anything extra added, like you said, like had someone been visiting, there was nothing like that. We have the weird side story about the Ron guy that the guy, told them about and took them to that property. And we know that they found something of importance and put a gag order on that property search. But it reads as though it's related to this case because that's the tip for this case was to go there, but we don't know if it actually has to do with this case or not. And there were multiple sightings of the green van, and more than a couple of which that said it looked like a blonde or Stacy driving it under duress.
Yeah, and that would be interesting if that tip came in after it was all over the news, after her face, and once their face is on the news and that sort of thing, it could be harder to differentiate. Like, okay, is this witness credible in the sense that they really see her? Was it really this way? Or are they seeing someone who they think is her because they've seen the image all over the news? I mean, people, everyone always kind of thinks they're really good at facial recognition and that sort of thing. But usually that's not the case. Like, people are not that accurate with it. But there had to have been, additional information that kind of led them onto that path, that was credible.
Sure. Man, well, I think that's it for the case.
I think it's a horrible example of when three people just completely disappear. And
it's unusual. It's very unusual, I think.
Well, yes. And it's one of those things, too, where, like I said, if you look at who's supposed to be at the house at that date, that time, if this is a normal pattern of activity or behavior, it's hard to narrow down. If all of a sudden now it's completely sporadic and they weren't even supposed to be there and they were changing plans, then you have to maybe look at people who are closer in that geographical area who has eyesight of the house or whatever, or at least access to it. But,
they're asking to the people who are coming in late. Marine's Blood says, can we just go on and do it over so that they can know what case we're talking about? This is the Springfield 3. I actually did this back in season 1 and we're revisiting it tonight. Unfortunately, not because there are updates, but because it's still unsolved and it's wild. But it's wild. But
I do think this is one of those where if you were to be able to walk the crime scene and see it exactly how it was, everything like we talked about, light switches are on or off, TV is on, all these things. Her car is not where it normally would be.
Everything appears, though, that it was a normal night. Like that Sherril went to bed and the girls came in to lay down. But the more I think about the fact that Sherril could have been dead when they got home, the more that sounds likely to me.
Yes, it could very well explain that. And so a lot of times people think, oh, there's got to be blood, but no, you can
of course
kill
not
without causing blood.
Absolutely. So next week, I was teasing at a surprise co-host next week, but next week I'm gonna recap. A lot of you guys enjoyed Boys on the Tracks. And that one takes a lot because it has got so much involved. I think when I did it last time, I said it should be 3 or 4 shows, and it probably should be. But I'm going to try to get it all done in one show, and I'm going to do it with easy breezy, beautiful Drew Breezy.
Is that CoverGirl commercial?
Easy breezy, beautiful CoverGirl.
Yep.
But Drewzy, so Drew Breezy, or What Say Drew, he is his podcast is Comm Center. He's on there with John, who's been in the chats tonight. And Drew's going to be co-host next week. And so we're going to cover the boys on the tracks, and that'll be fun. Haven't done a show with Drew since, prior to season 2. So prior to August, I guess it's been. So it's been a while. So looking forward to it. We're both pumped about it. It's been a long time. And I'm sure he'll come with his regular smart assery. And it's gonna be a good one. Yeah. So we're pumped. But how are you doing, BC? You got new stuff going on?
Do I?
Michael, yes, to answer your question in the chats. Yeah, what you got going on, BC?
Oh, still doing the gang training stuff virtually. Still, and I'll post those on Instagram. If you're not on Instagram, shoot me an email at thedisruptors.bc.ski, that's SKI, at Gmail. And just let me know if you're interested in any kind of gang training. I'll show you the future dates. They're easy, virtual links you click on, and then we just talk. I can present videos, PowerPoint, all that stuff.
Yep.
And still cranking out episodes of Disruptors. Recorded one today. Got one recording. I'm gonna do Thursday, and I'll probably post one later tonight or tomorrow. Probably tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, you've got a lot. You've got a lot of episodes stacked up right now.
Getting there.
Yeah, I wish I could do that. One a week is about as much as I can.
Because you're live, though. Like, that's the great thing.
Yeah, I'm live. All right. Well, you guys, you can visit BC Sanders at his Instagram page at the same name, or at the Disruptors Podcast with BC and Ski. You can find them on YouTube at the same name. Their channel is there. Come visit me on Instagram. Give me a follow. Give me a like and all that silly stuff I have to tell you to do. Again, on YouTube every Tuesday night, 8/7 Central, we are live for Night Shift on the Andrea Up Late YouTube channel. And I'll put all the pics and everything, as always, the narrative related to this case on Instagram. And then you can stream wherever you listen to your podcast. So let's hit those subscribe buttons and what?
I was going to say they can write reviews. And
they can write reviews. They can. If you want to support the show in a different kind of way, I think Spotify has a link for that now. That's a new development.
Oh. That's right.
Because there's no like super chats and all that stuff on here for me currently. So, but yeah, so you guys look into all that stuff. We are thankful you're back with us this week, and we always look forward to it. I will tell you that I'm pretty motivated for the next few weeks. We've got some big stuff coming up. So like I said, next week is a big week with Drew Breezy as co-host and the Boys on the Tracks show. It's two big things in one there. And then we've got the week after that, a case coming up that I'm incredibly passionate about. It's from my hometown. BC and I have been pouring over this. I mean, to the point of essentially recreating a scene here. We've got the victim's mother is in communication, and so she will also be on probably not that show, but probably a part 2 or a part 3 right after that. It's a case that involves a whole lot, and like I said, it's close to me in that sense, and I am really thankful to be able to be a part of getting the word out for this one, because it's a crazy case. I want y'all to hear that as well. So you guys, I hope y'all have a great week, and I hope that you enjoyed the case tonight. If you have any information on this, I will put the number for Crime Stoppers back up again a little bit later. But I guess that should do it for tonight. It's getting a little bit late. So for that matter, I guess we will see y'all next Tuesday. I mean,
is it still?
Whatever. Y'all just stay on here all night. It's fine.